through some of these things rather quickly. And I will be able to go into more detail in the Q&A, and also obviously feel free to contact me either on email or on Twitter, as Jackie highlighted. So there's 3 projects I really want to talk about, and highlight some of the methodological issues, some of the problems that arose, some of the issues around ethics as the projects unfolded. I should also highlight that a lot of this thinking is coming together in a book that I'm currently completing for Sage. It's a methods textbook called Research in Social Media. And the argument that I make with my co-author, Mike Thirlwell, who is a computer scientist, is that we want students or whoever engages with the book to try and engage with social media through its bespoke objects. And some of those objects are unique to the internet, like hyperlinks. So what we've done is we've organized the book so that each chapter deals with one of these objects, but we also add to that mix ethics, which is very important, and it's increasingly becoming more visible as a very serious issue around privacy as well. And also to see these companies as institutions in the same way you might study the history of the BBC. There isn't enough critical engagement with these companies as global conglomerates and what that might mean in terms of the data they produce and how we engage with these platforms. So if you're interested, I'm also running this as a module of the same title, Researching Social Media, and we have a hashtag MS7042, and on that I share information with my students. My students use the hashtag to discuss issues on the module. And I've noticed that various other users on Twitter have really kind of started engaging with that hashtag as well. And the book account is Resoc Media on Twitter. And the key thing that we try to do, both with the book and with the module, is issues around data collection and archiving. And then, of course, the ethics and the methods that you then might use once you have the data. But one of the things in having worked in this space for the last 8 years is that the data collection and the corpus building and the critical building of a corpus often is neglected. And so this is one of the things that we're particularly interested in. So the first project I want to highlight a little bit is called Kidnap the Video Battle, how YouTube enables the young to perform their religious and public identities. And I was a research associate on this in 2009. It was a project funded by the Religion and Society program, which is of course AHRC, ESRC. And what we looked at was a controversy that had erupted in the Netherlands in early 2008 around a highly Islamophobic short film that a Dutch right-wing MP had put on the internet. There's no public service broadcaster was willing to air the film, so he used the internet to put this film on. And within about 3 hours, it had 3 million hits, and the website where it was launched got people with death threats, and it caused a kind of controversy similar to the Mohammed cartoons had done previously in Denmark. And so what we were interested in is the response that people were making to this film, and particularly the response videos that they were uploading on YouTube. And so YouTube became a key site of responses for this controversial film. And what was interesting in the mainstream media debate is that none of the mainstream media debate engaged with the film. So none of the debate in the mainstream media engaged with the content of the film around Islamophobic issues. It was much more around freedom of speech. Should the public service broadcasters have aired the film and so on. So what we were interested in is seeing what kinds of responses these YouTube videos allowed for in this different space. Now, in terms of why is YouTube interesting in terms of studying something like this, YouTube is a phenomenon that I find really hard to grasp in terms of what it is and just how big it has gotten. So, I mean, here are some statistics that I won't all read out to you, but this is from last year. More than 13 million hours of video uploaded during 2010 and 35 hours of video uploaded every minute. 35 hours of video every minute. I mean, these are huge, huge statistics in terms of volume of data, of material available for study. Also, the traffic from YouTube comes from all over the world. 70% of the traffic is from outside the US. And people of all sorts of ages use YouTube, so it has a very broad demographic. Now, a further kind of reason why studying YouTube is interesting and worthwhile is it's because it's one of the main things we do online. We engage with social media increasingly in a kind of very dominant way in terms of kind of internet traffic. So if we look at some statistics from Alexa, this is from last year, or from 2 years ago now, you have the unexpected 1, 2, 3 of Google, Facebook, and YouTube, and of course YouTube is owned by Google. So in terms of what we tend to do online globally, we are Googling on Farmville, watching videos on YouTube. So this is always, I think, important data to bear in mind, and also to see that the spread of where YouTube really ranks highly across the world is really wide. So it's the second most visited website, for example, in Saudi Arabia in 2010. So this is just a tiny bit of background about YouTube as a platform. Now, methodologically, I think, and this is kind of my thinking in 2009. Certainly, there were a lot of assumptions about what data what constituted data on YouTube and how easy it was to collect. And one of the things that I found when I was working as a research associate on this project is that it wasn't easy at all. That data on YouTube is highly interactive. It's very, very difficult to catch. Posters get banned. Comments are uploaded. So this is a very kind of a data archive that is constantly in flux. The other thing about YouTube is that it is a social networking site. So this is one of the things that people tend to forget, that the functionality of YouTube allows you to subscribe to other people's channels, it allows you to friend people, it of course allows you to comment if you are a registered user, and all of that produces a lot of text. So YouTube produces a lot of text. There's a lot of visual material, but there's also lots and lots of text that often gets forgotten. In terms of what people do on YouTube, Farida in 2008 looked at what makes up the core of YouTube. So is it really sort of skateboarding dogs and skateboarding incidents and manga videos? And to a certain extent, yes, it is. But there was also a significant cluster around religion. So people tend to do a lot of religion on YouTube, or material that gets labeled in some way to do with religion is a significant cluster, specifically to do with Christianity and Islam, which is, again, why we were particularly interested in looking at Islamophobia. Now, just to give you a very quick overview of the trouble I found myself in 2009 when I did my pilot study looking for videos that were relevant according to the search criteria. So I did lots of different combinations of searches to find in the web interface of YouTube how many results I would find. And what I realized very quickly is that you hit the limits of the Google search engine, which I hadn't heard of in 2009, but Google only allows you to see the top 1,000 results. So even though Google will say to you there's 2 million hits, or it will say to you on YouTube there's 3 million videos that fall into those search parameters, it will only give you access to 1,000, which to social scientists is an issue because it's very unclear due to their PageRank algorithm that nobody kind of knows exactly how it works, what you actually get shown. And so one of the things that I found was that there was also in my 1,000 search results a very strange loop where I would only see the first 320, and after that it would loop back to the beginning. So I didn't even get 1,000. So these are all really serious issues when you are trying to build a corpus and defend it for its reliability. It's very difficult to do. So the next very big issue was the manual coding of the metadata that I finished in 2009 attempted to do. Because if you're looking for things like gender, it's very, very difficult to gauge from people's channel what gender they are. What are the gender clues that reliably tell you this is a female poster? And again, very quickly you enter into territory where you simply cannot report these findings because they're very shaky. So I teamed up with my friend Mike Thurwell, who's a computer scientist, And he built a tool based on the open API of YouTube, which is the application programming interface, which allows you to build software to communicate with YouTube directly, and it gives you access to the registration information of YouTube, which raises ethical issues that I think are important to address. But what it allowed you to do is to create a snapshot of what those results were at that particular time. So this is, it's a very sort of simple interface. You put in your search terms, and it basically grabs the 1,000 videos that you have access to, but it also automatically codes all the metadata. So it will code the gender, the country location, the age, everything that people have uploaded at the point of registration just gets coded in one go. Which means that you then have a much more manageable corpus. In terms of then archiving that data, I used a tool called YouTube Catcher. There's lots of different free tools available that allow you to then download these videos. And this was the tool that I used because it allows you to do batch downloads. So I did batch downloads of 50 at a time, which is very time consuming. And there are better ways of doing that. And I think it will involve sort of multiple researchers doing that at the same time to make sure that videos don't disappear, because 10% of our corpus disappeared because one of the people uploading got banned. So in the end, through kind of different combinations of search terms, I ended up with 1,413 videos. And because we had all the metadata coded automatically, I could sort of navigate that corpus in different ways. And so I could say, I want to cut slice of all the people who are between 18 and 24 in this location, for example, the UK, and then these are all the videos. So it just allows you a much easier way to look at different subsets. Methodologically, once we had the data, we wanted to use kind of multiple methods to look at it and to see what we had, and then sort of build up this picture of what the different methods showed us, because we're very aware that every method has its limitations, and combining lots of different methods allows you to find flaws in different methodological approaches, but it also allows you to find out more. So we did a content analysis of videos uploaded by women, and we found a very interesting grouping of Egyptian women uploading videos. We did a network analysis, which I will say a little bit more about, because the network that you can build using the tool allows you to look at the networks of people who've commented frequently on particular videos, who've subscribed to channels, which is a one-directional relationship. You don't have to subscribe to each other, but you have to friend each other in the same way that you have to friend each other on Facebook and say yes, I know this person. So it's a different kind of relationship. We did a genre analysis. YouTube has a set of different genres that we had to describe much more closely than the literature currently allowed for. And we did a survey. We actually asked people, why did you upload these videos? Because often this kind of research neglects to ask people for their motivation. So this is one of the networks that we looked at. This is based on subscriptions. And what it shows is that for computer scientists, I don't know if there's any computer scientists in the room, this is a very small network. These are very small networks based on not very much data, because a lot of people simply weren't subscribing to people's channels that were in the corpus. And so what we found is in the middle, quite a large network of people sympathetic to Islam, and we call that the pro-Islam network, and then much smaller, very kind of small networks hovering around that. But what we found, unsurprisingly, is that these are like-minded people connected through networks that we could kind of label fairly easily. And this is a very much smaller image, but this is the same network but anonymized. And one of the things that happened is when we sent this to New Media and Society, even though we'd had all these kind of discussions about ethics ourselves within the research group, and we decided we didn't have to go back to the ethics board in light of us having built a tool that was based on the YouTube API, luckily New Media and Society pulled us up on that and said, well, maybe it's better if you anonymize this. And so we had this big discussion about, what these cybermetric tools allow you to show that isn't necessarily so visible by simply going to these channels. And so we talked about it in terms of semi-public data. And I think this idea of semi-public data is an interesting concept to explore further in relation to social media data, because it's often simply described as public data, and issues around ethics are coming into it, but I think not enough. And I think we need to have a much more critical debate about the tools that allow you access to something that isn't necessarily publicly available through the web interface. And so we made this point in the paper that got published about semi-public data. The other thing that I want to pull out of that as well is the concept of data visualizations and the increasing, I think, power data visualizations have over a fallacy of connectedness that is being suggested. And this is another point we make in the article, that cybermetric tools are very good at suggesting a connectedness that on closer inspection, on closer qualitative inspection, isn't necessarily there at all. So it's very difficult for these tools to say, well, you were friends with this person 5 years ago and you didn't have the heart to unfriend them on Facebook. The line is still the same. And so the argument that we make is that this is a start, but it needs qualitative close reading and further investigation. And particularly this links to the current kind of moment of big data and how these visualizations are becoming really ubiquitous, and they, I think, need much more critical, attention. Now, again, if these slides get shared, you can have a closer look at these. But what we did also was a content analysis that wanted to look at how the videos uploaded by women presented Islam and the role of women in Islam in the response videos, because this had been such a powerful discourse in the original film. So we wanted to see how is this kind of dichotomy between us and them present in the response videos by women. And we saw, unsurprisingly, perhaps a much more kind of diverse role of women in Islam, women who spoke for themselves, who were visible in multiple kind of occupations inside the house, outside the house, and so on. But again, we wrote a paper on that. Now, so what the tool allows you to do, and the tool is now been rechristened Webmetric Analyst, it allows you to get this very kind of quick information about your corpus. And so we found very quickly that videos were uploaded from 72 different countries. Most of them came from the Netherlands, but some came from the US and the UK. So it just allows you different kind of engagement with the data that doesn't require so much effort, but gives you a useful way in. Also, in terms of age, we weren't surprised to find that this was a largely male-dominated corpus, both across the corpus, but also in terms of this very problematic term around the net generation that Don Tapscott has introduced, that 82% of these people younger than 30 were male. So it's very heavily male-dominated. So as I said, we looked at posters, female posters, and one of the things that we found is when you look at the distribution of when these women were uploading the videos, you see two peaks. So you see a peak at the time of the original video, and you see a peak nearly a year later. And we were thinking, okay, on these search terms, fitna and wilders, what is going on more than a year after the uploading of the video? And then we realized, because people are generating traffic for their channel and they're clever in the tags that they use. So they use popular tags, fitna and wilders, to generate traffic to what was basically a large corpus of conversion videos and getting people to convert to Islam. So they had nothing to do with the original video, but it was clever tagging that was used. We found that a lot of these videos by women came from Egypt. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail what these videos were all about, but they were very interesting two-part response, carefully crafted response by a group of young Egyptian women. who were also very courteous in terms of how they engaged with people, asking them, why did you do this? Is it okay for you to act as a kind of female scholar in Islam? And there's all sorts of issues around gender segregation in Islam, and YouTube, of course, being a non-gender segregated space, and these women taking it upon themselves to do this response in this way. We also did a survey where we found we got responses from 40 users, and we had to set up a YouTube channel to do this. So if you want to interview people about why they're uploading things on YouTube, you have to have a presence on YouTube, because that's the only way you can contact them. And so I had to build our channel and sort of make it look more, more lively than the original sort of empty warehouse look that it had, in order to really get people to contact us and respond to the survey, which is very, very difficult. We had to sort of send out about 5 rounds or 6 rounds of begging messages, and we got 40 responses. Other responses we got, which I want to touch on very briefly, is the potential kind of backlash that being in this social media space can have, because people also have access to you. So this is someone who made a video in response to our project that he addressed to the Loughborough University's Ethical Advice Committee. What Geert Wilders didn't tell about fitna, and he used the logo of the university, and he presents himself in the film as an advisor to the project, which he wasn't. He was kind of crazy. But for about a week, if you Googled Loughborough University plus YouTube, that's what you got. So the HRC went into kind of lockdown for a weekend, and I, tried to sort of deal with this, but there's nothing you can do. YouTube is not going to take this down for you. You can kind of contact him and say, please, don't do this, but then there is, of course, a risk that he will make this whole discussion public and so on, because he was heavily promoting this on Twitter and various other social media channels. The other thing is that bloggers in Holland were blogging about the project, and again using these kind of like sort of sexy headlines about our project that generated again a lot of traffic and a lot of flaming in the comments about the uselessness of our research, particularly the uselessness of the professor leading it and her political leanings and so on. So these were all really small examples of where things can go kind of horribly wrong if you don't think about the potential backlash or the potential space that you put yourself in and not being able to kind of deal with that. I got a lot of requests via YouTube about my name. My name's Farida. I have an Arabic name. Was I available for dates and so on? Could I send photographs of myself? So these are all issues that you potentially have to deal with, particularly for very sensitive topics like Islam and Islamophobia. This is just a slide of the project. So in terms of tagging, I want to say something very quick about a project that I'm working on now, which is trying to map Islam according to how people tag on YouTube. So one of the ways that I originally thought about, well, what can I do in relation to tagging, or how can I map this religion on YouTube? There's lots of ways in which you could approach that. You could try and make this extensive list of what are all the kind of relevant keywords that people might be using for Islam, and very quickly, after about a week, I thought this is not going anywhere because it will never be extensive enough. I will just never be able to kind of grasp it. You could go through different categories that people use to upload material on Islam. So the how-to category on YouTube is very popular. How to tie a headscarf. This is a hugely popular area, particularly among younger Muslims whose parents may not be as religious as they are. So this kind of generational issue comes through quite strongly. There's also Islamic Tube, which is an Islamic version of YouTube, which is not very popular because it's a sort of halal version of YouTube that hasn't really taken off. Because of course YouTube itself is haram because it's non-gender segregated, and there's all sorts of unsavory things that one might find clicking too eagerly. In terms of comments, and this is a paper that I wrote with Mike Thurwell, one of the things that we find with the Fitna project is that there is a perception that YouTube is a very, very negative space that is male-dominated, and that there's lots of flaming and lots of aggression. And part of the argument that we're trying to make in this paper is that that's largely because a lot of work on YouTube is about events and it's topic driven. And so if you're going to look at things like Islamophobia, well, you're going to find heated debate. If you study the natural makeup tutorial on YouTube, which is one of the most popular videos on YouTube, you're not going to find this heated flaming. So the point that we wanted to make in this paper is to say what happens if you take a sort of random sample of YouTube, which is kind of not easy to do, but I mean, we talk about the methods in the paper, and actually see what's typical. What is typical by the average poster, what is typical by the average comment, and what is kind of the baseline of what's going on YouTube. And the only way in which you can do that is if you have a statistician as your best friend, which my kid is. And so what we found is that on average, comments are mildly positive. We did a sentiment analysis. The average poster is a 29-year-old male. Comments contain 58 characters on average, and very few, or around 25%, of comments were actually responses to previous comments. So in terms of this idea, social media is a conversation, it's a dialogue, there isn't really that much evidence in a way to suggest that people are having all these amazing dialogues on social media. People tend to upload their opinion, and that doesn't often get a response. And we found equal numbers of videos with a few comments, as well as ones with enormous amounts of comments. What was very interesting is when we looked at what is a key trigger for discussion and what makes people angry is religion. So across this whole set of videos, the three videos that got the most heated debate were all about religion. And so this is something really worth kind of looking into more. It's mainly atheists fighting Christians on YouTube, and issues around creation. Now, YouTube itself doesn't have a category for religion, so it's also interesting how the company doesn't allow people to categorize their material as religion. And so people kind of squeeze them into all sorts of different categories, like how-to, comedy, science. There's lots of different categories that people ended up using. And so what we conclude is that the ways in which people use YouTube is, for passive consumption of, music videos, for example, but also for really much more active audience engagement in the way that we found on religion. Now, looking at how these people use tags, I found that by looking at how videos are tagged with the main religions, that Islam gets by far the most tagging traffic. So there's around 2 million videos tagged with Islam compared to the other religions. Now, of course, I understand that the enormous limitation of this is that people might not tag Christianity, they might say Jesus or Christian or other words. But if you look at 2008, which is this tiny slither here, this is just over 100,000 tags for Islam, and last summer it was nearly 2 million. So just by looking at Islam, there is this explosion in what people tag with Islam, and I do think that there's something interesting there. Last year there was a slight flurry of increased tagging around Christianity, which I put down to people getting to the rapture ready and worried about the end of the world, and there were a lot of videos about how to survive the end of the world. In terms of the limitation of the search engine, if you have 2 million videos tagged with Islam, you will only get access to that tiny slither that you probably can't see. But this is just a reminder of how little access you actually have to this huge corpus that is out there somewhere on social media, but you can't get it. So that's very important. Now, I'll just very quickly go through what happens when you search for Islam. The basic search function is that it sorts on relevance, which gives you a list of different findings that immediately show you that there's these different discourses on Islam. So it's about Islam the religion, it's about Islam the religion as a threat in Western society, it's about Cat Stevens' use of Islam, it's about how Obama, of course, is a Muslim, and there's a whole different kind of discourses that are going on. If you search from view count, the top video is an alien autopsy video, which has been tagged Islam, but it's also been tagged Jesus, Christ, UFOs. So again, what is shown here is the ways in which people use tagging to generate traffic. So this is kind of, a red herring, and it's not a very good alien autopsy video as is. The other thing that you find is something that I didn't know about Islam, and that is spirit possession and exorcism. And so there's a lot of videos that show people possessed with spirits. So sort of flopping around on sofas, on floors, and someone trying to get the spirit out. And these videos get 4 million hits. So in terms of the discourses in the mainstream media or in popular culture around Islam, trying to kind of do something different and looking at what people tag Islam on YouTube has been very productive in finding these things that I just didn't know were out there from having looked at the mainstream media. If you look at rating, you typically find videos that are about how to be a good Muslim, how to practice Islam. So this is just, this is obviously just an indication of where this might lead you. Now, in the last sort of 10 minutes, I want to touch on Twitter and a project that I'm currently involved in called Reading the Riots on Twitter, which is a collaboration with The Guardian and Twitter and a number of universities, and I'm the social media lead on this project. Now, one of the things that happened during the riots last summer is that social media was being blamed for having caused the riots, and Twitter was very nervous about this and therefore donated a corpus of 2.6 million riot tweets to The Guardian, uploaded by 700,000 users. And of course, I don't have enough time to talk about the issues with not having constructed that corpus ourselves. The corpus was built using 150 or more than 150 different hashtags, but I remain slightly nervous about having been given data to then look at. I think this is an issue that needs to be set up front. So what The Guardian was interested in is the role of rumours, whether or not incitement took place. So there were people who were being arrested for having incited on Facebook, for example, and getting extraordinarily long jail sentences for having very unsuccessfully organised riots on Facebook, to which only the police showed up to then promptly arrest them and give them 4 years in jail. We were interested in the role different actors had on Twitter. So methods matter in these kinds of projects, in trying to combine large quant with closer qualitative readings, and it requires interdisciplinary teams of, I would say, certainly computer scientists and media scholars, plus everyone else. And so what we looked at is I sort of set up a methodological framework that in the first instance tried to figure out what is unique in this corpus, what is an original tweet, what is a retweet, how can we sort of figure out what is going on here according to what in communication studies is called information flows. So what we try to identify is each tweet as an information flow and see how present these individual information flows were across the whole corpus. So we built an algorithm with the computer scientist, Rob Proctor and Alex Voss, built an algorithm that was able to identify identical or near identical tweets and put them in what we call bins. So that you end up with a bin saying this is the original tweet and it has 10,000 children, for example, because so many people retweeted it or slightly modified the tweet. And this is based on a paper by Gilad Lotan that can be shared with you later as well. Now, I will try to go through this extremely quickly because I recognize that I'm running out of time, but in terms of dealing with the content of these tweets, I built a code frame that allowed us to distinguish between tweets that were actually using the media as a source and linking to a media report, or that were simply images. So a lot of people uploaded images, and people upload images on Twitter a lot. Things that were unverified, so claims that were being made but didn't get backup from a media source, which we kind of problematically called rumours, and I'm not 100% happy with that because I think it slightly implies something else. We looked at reactions. There were tons and tons of reactions, particularly around what should be done to the looters, and it was made for very grim reading what people were publicly saying should be done to these people. Whether the link was broken or not in the tweet and other. Now, The Guardian itself had, in early August, made a very basic visualization based on a set of Twitter hashtags that were essentially location-based. So people would say things are kicking off in Tottenham and started tagging. If you don't know what a hashtag is on Twitter, it allows you to label your tweet according to a particular theme or however you want people to then find you. So what started to happen in the riots is that people were using hashtags based on location, saying it's kicking off in Birmingham, might it come to Manchester, and these hashtags would then allow you to build this visualization, which shows you how the riots sort of developed over that 4-day period according to where people were saying things were happening. And one of the things that was quite clear is that the biggest peak was the riot cleanup, that people were talking about the riot cleanup, and that was potentially seen by 7 million users. And the riot cleanup account was set up by someone called Dan Thompson, which overnight got 60,000 users or followers. And it became a very useful mechanism to mobilize people for these riot cleanups. Whatever you think of them, it was very effective. The last peak here is Manchester, which is a smaller peak. And also later on in the riot cycle, where of course the Greater Manchester Police was much more prepared for the riots than the Met, which who got enormous amount of criticism. So in terms of the rumours, there were a number of rumours floating around at the time, including animals having been let out of the zoo, rioters apparently frying their own food in McDonald's, the London Eye having been pushed over and set on fire, even though some people were saying, but isn't it made of metal? The Birmingham Children's Hospital having been under attack, the army rolling into Bank, this turned out to be an image from Tahrir Square, and Miss Selfridge in Manchester having been set on fire, which did happen. So what we did was, all of these 7 rumours are about 10,000 individual tweets, and each tweet was coded in triplicate by human coders. So each tweet was coded by 3 different people, and then the results from those codings were given to the Guardian to visualize. And so what we coded for in green, and we have one of our coders here as well, I did tons of coding myself, in green was simply that the claim was being repeated. In red, that there's opposition to the claim. In yellow, where people were asking, is this happening? And in grey, where people were commenting. So this is the rumour that animals had been let out of the zoo, and what you see is that the claims being repeated really sort of explode early on. Although some people are asking, is this really happening? Is this really true? Like, is this real? There was a picture floating around of a tiger apparently running around Primrose Hill. And people were really asking, well, I'm not sure, is this real? And then slowly what you see is red dots emerge, where people say, I don't think this is true at all. I don't believe this. I think I've seen this before. And what you then get is people offering an alternative explanation and starting to say, no, actually, I know that picture, and you see the red increasing. I know that picture. That's an animal that escaped an Italian zoo, and it's from 2008, and here's the evidence, here's the original story. So what you get in the cycle of this rumour is people discrediting it, but then kind of surprisingly to us, that dies down, and the green takes over again. So what's very interesting is often, I think, through visualization, may it be a very simple bar chart, by seeing something visualized, you have an extra layer of analytical insight. And I think the extra layer of analytical insight for someone like me who works mainly in crisis communication is, the emergency services really need to know about this. They really need to understand that in the life cycle of a rumour, where accurate information can be so important in the initial aftermath of a natural disaster or a crisis situation like the riots, to keep repeating and keep debunking that rumour, because it has to continuously cascade through these information networks where we are no longer watching the same TV channel. And this is the thing that I think we often forget about Twitter, is that we are connected to our own networks where this information might not have cascaded down. And so by repeatedly debunking that rumour, and we see here that happens in a second sort of cycle, that's very important. Now, we also looked at who tweeted the riots. So we just made a list of the accounts that were most mentioned. And these mentions can come from original tweets, from retweets, from app replies, or from an actual mention, which means that it's still all grouped together, and we need to find out much more about what these mentions actually consisted of. But what we can see is that the riot cleanup account is most mentioned, with nearly 41,000 mentions in the corpus, followed swiftly by Paul Lewis, the journalist from The Guardian, who really ran away with understanding how to use Twitter in that moment. and followed by a number of other news organizations, but also the Greater Manchester Police coming in at number 10. And so what I worked on is, based on the top 1,000 most mentioned accounts, I built a coding frame of a 20-point actor type typology to just get a sense of who are these actors. So this is looking at the top 200, and what you see is that the mainstream media on the left of the bar chart is really dominant. So mentions of the mainstream media, information distributed through the mainstream media is really, really very, very important, as are these riot accounts where people either are talking about the riot cleanup or they're aggregating information. This is often what you see in crisis situations, that people set up accounts specifically to aggregate information and to filter information. But also people who were saying, you know, let's identify these looters. So you had a number of things going on. So what we could see is that people were using Twitter in lots of different communicative ways. They were using it to broadcast, they were using it to seek information, they were using it to voice their opinions, but they were also using it for humor. And one of the things about Twitter is that a lot of Twitter is about irony, and a lot of Twitter is about humor. And so what we found is that in the top 25 most mentioned accounts, we have at number 13 Lord Voldemort, the Dark Lord, who gets nearly 7,000 mentions in the corpus. And so there was lots of kind of humorous tweeting going on. His sometimes sidekick, Professor Snape, was in there, number 20, number 23, the Queen, which is a very successful spoof account on Twitter. So having this kind of understanding of the fabric of Twitter is really important for analyzing this data. There's nothing unusual about finding this. This is just Twitter. In terms of further kind of use of humor, we found a lot of commentary, social commentary, about other situations that were happening at the same time, specifically Hackgate. So we had someone running sort of fake PR for Rupert Murdoch, making all sorts of comments about, you know, what Rupert would do in this case. But also comments about the police's difficulty in trying to break into BlackBerry Messenger, which is a closed network, which was the network that was used to ping these broadcasts and to organize riots. And they, you know, there were a lot of tweets that said, well, you can't get into BBM. Why don't you just ask News International? So there was a lot of very interesting and ironic commentary about the institutions trying to deal with the riots and not being able to do what News International is very good at, basically stealing people's information. There were lots of images also that had a humorous theme. So this was actually Manchester and Debenhams, where someone was planking in front of the riot police. And planking is the sort of craze that swept the globe, where you lie stiff as a plank on multiple surfaces and then share these images. So this planking image was shared around 500,000 times. And again, this is not unusual about how people use Twitter. Now, in terms of a kind of conclusion, I think it's really important to understand the context in which this communication is taking place, and also to scale it down to local context. So it's really nice if you've made it into the top 200, but if you're a local journalist or if you're a local emergency service person, you may only need 10 retweets to actually connect to the community that's most important to you, and that information needs to cascade into a much smaller group. So this is one of the things that I'm really interested in. The other thing we saw very powerfully is the rise of the individual. I think 2011, in terms of social media use, is really the year of the rise of the individual user and the individual influencer. And so these lists of influence that The Independent, for example, puts out, the UK Twitterati, they've this year put out a second list, which is about individual users. And these are users who've really come to prominence in the Arab Spring, but also in the riots. So when I looked at that second list of individual influencers, individual citizen influencers, if you like, a lot of our users were on that new independent list. I'm interested in the role of rumours in crisis communication. I think this is a very important area for further study. And I'm very interested in the role of the emergency services, and particularly the police. And so much to my concern, the police is very interested in this work. And so I think in the current moment, particularly in the run-up to the Olympics, I think social media failed so badly for the emergency services and the riots, and they're very aware that the Olympics is going to produce the largest sort of social media tsunami we will have seen up to now, and Twitter is very aware of that. And so there's all sorts of moves being made by all sorts of different agents to try and deal with that. And of course, Iblis is very interested in intelligence gathering, which raises all sorts of issues around ethics, around what is okay to collect and so on, and by whom. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that 40% of Twitter users aren't active. They have an account, but they just listen. And I think listening in social media is much underexplored. So we tend in media studies to look at active people who are actively doing something, like fans. They're a very good group of people to study in terms of activity, but I think it's really important to see Twitter also as a listening platform, particularly the role that it has in crises in terms of this kind of much more broadcasting model. And so I think I'll leave it at that. Other than to say, if you're interested in who tweeted the riots, if you have a look at researchingsocialmedia.org, this is one of the posts that I put up, which really fully explains the kind of code frame and how we did it. And the website will have more information. And the software that I mentioned is Webometric Analyst, and CentiStrength was used in the YouTube piece that I highlighted. And they're both built by Mike Thurwell. So I'll leave it